Hard Turn is presented by Overlake Medical Center and Clinics.
Life is full of big moments of change and transformation where we have to pivot on our path.
Those moments come with a wide variety of emotions, from fear and anxiety to joy and relief.
I'm Kelly Koopmans.
And I'm Mary Nam.
And this is Hard Turn.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Mary Nam.
I'm Kelly Koopmans.
You're listening to the Hard Turn podcast, where we talk about all of life's hard turns. We all experience one, Kelly.
We sure do. How are you doing today?
Are we going to be honest?
Honesty is our number one principle on Hard Turn.
I'm sitting here wearing a back brace, one of those elastic things. I threw out my back sleeping. My lower back. I don't know why this is happening to me.
So not strenuous exercise or
that's the
saving
worst part. That is the worst part. And we discussed this earlier. I feel like I'm making all the right life decisions right now. I'm cutting back on my alcohol intake.
You can listen to Katie's episode.
We talked about Soberish Mom, your guest, and, I thought I'd give it a go. And as a reward, my back went out. So my guests, Jennifer Sullivan and Jerry Reiner, they are the owners and operators of Guardian Cellars. But we're not talking about wine in the sense that we talked about wine with your guest, with Soberish Mom. This is more of a career maneuver, a really cool dream that seems like it was born out of something whimsical, but it wasn't. And I'm going to talk about that. So the backstory is Jerry majored in chemistry in college, decided to be a cop, and now he makes wine.
Okay, all very related.
Really? But I love those stories because it opens the whole, I don't know, it's like the possibilities, right? It's like someone else did it. That's crazy. But they pulled it off. I love those stories.
I always it's kind of like when someone goes to college and they're studying English.
Yeah.
And it's like, what on earth are you going to do? Here you go, kids. Yeah. Here's your ticket. It doesn't matter.
No, they become a professional, famous belly dancer.
Why not?
I'm just trying to draw these lines that you would not normally connect with your brain. Jennifer, lifelong journalist, newspaper reporter.
Wonderful human being.
Yes, wonderful human being. Went into TV journalism for a couple of years. Now, she's married to Jerry. They own a winery, and a really successful one, too.
Oh, I can't wait to hear how it... I knew that they had this winery, but I don't know the backstory of how it came to be because they come from all different backgrounds, just like you're saying. So it'll be really interesting to see how it all came to fruition.
I'll let Jerry explain how it came to be.
So my degree is in organic chemistry. I love science. I really enjoy science. During college, I went on police ride-along, loved it, knew I wanted to do that. But I also enjoy science, so if I was going to get a degree, I just well get it in something I like. So I did that, became a police officer, and then this volunteering was kind of by accident. It was the winery was between my home and where I was working. I'd drive by it all the time. I was 26. I wasn't into wine. Didn't even know it was a winery and was curious as to what the building was and why a semi-truck pulled in. So I literally pulled in to found out it was a winery. Found out it was all volunteers. It was bottling day. I hung around the rest of that day. The next day I was off, so I went there and volunteered. And then a month later, semi-truck is back. So I pull in to find out what's going on, and there's only 2 cars this time, so there's nobody really there, just a couple people. And a semi-truck. I pull in to find out that it's actually harvest has begun and fruit's coming in. So I just started volunteering, and I just wouldn't leave. And just because I liked the process. It was just so interesting, and it's fun. Like, walk in, there's all these stainless steel tanks and oak barrels. Then with being around some of the winemakers there, and like, oh, you got to try this. You have to try this. I'm like, oh, my, this is nothing like what I ever had. And then it was just kind of that epiphany that occurs, like, I really love this. And like everything from the process, the doing it. I mean, my parents were small-town farmers growing up. Summer vacation for me, even though being born and raised in San Francisco, was to go back to the farm and work on a farm during the summer for 3 weeks and then drive home. That was vacation. And so I always enjoyed farming. I enjoyed this organic chemistry side of winemaking. I enjoyed, shockingly for me, because I always said I have no art ability in my life, but I think wine is an art form. And so it was kind of starting to tie all these things in. And even though I love being a police officer, this was just kind of a second love that started for me. Like, I really enjoy being around this. I like the people, the process. It's just everything.
I wish you could see Kelly's face looking at me like, what?
I love how there just was this innate curiosity of, what is that building? What are they doing there? And not just to have the thought, but to take action on it and pull in and just be like, hey, you don't know me, I don't know you, but what you doing?
I know, right? Like the curiosity is the driving force here. And I'm going to say this because this is what Jerry told me. He said he didn't drink wine very much. It was not his thing, never his thing. And he says when he was growing up, his parents only drank bad wine. So he was never interested. You know, he had it and didn't like it. But one day he sees this truck pulling in and it's harvest. What's going on? And he just wouldn't leave. He fell in love with the process. I think some of that has to do with his background in organic chemistry because that was his major.
It has to.
Right.
That has to be some of the parallel of him being like knowing how the grapes break down and all the science that goes behind it. It's like when you go to a winery and you do a tasting because, of course, you're there to learn about the scientific process. Not the taste of the wine, but they tell you about how it breaks down and all the science of an oak barrel versus a stainless steel.
Yeah.
But he would know all that. So actually, it makes a lot of sense.
Yep. And it's just when that bug bites you and it doesn't let go, you know, that passion. I think that is such a cool thing. It doesn't happen to everyone. But to hear him describe it, it clearly just seized him. It was just like, I'm not looking back. I love it.
That's awesome. And I love how he just stuck around to keep learning about it.
Right. He goes on to say, Jerry's the kind of guy where, you know, if he loves it, he's going to invest his time into it. And he majored in organic chemistry because he loved chemistry. He also loves being a cop. So when you ask him, you know, do you enjoy being a police officer? And during his shift, yes, I love it. I'm a police officer right now. But when he's at the winery, I'm a winemaker now. He's not afraid to wear all of these different hats. And I love that he doesn't see anything wrong with having so many different things to wear and being fully confident and invested in whatever he happens to be wearing at that time. I just because you don't have to be one thing.
How long was this process of him just driving by and stopping by and learning about what they were doing? Months.
A few months.
Okay.
Weeks and months. So it wasn't years, though. It wasn't, I mean, this thing, once it got him going, it
Got him good.
Yes. So if we were to stop the conversation there, one might think, well, that's how Guardian Cellars was born. Happy ending, the end. Well.
But wait, there's more.
There comes a time, right, when the bug bites and the dream happens and everything's so exciting and new and yes, let's do this. We're going to hit the ground running and invest all of our time and money and effort into it and realize a dream. But every time that happens, reality comes crashing in because that's how life is. And it certainly happened to Jennifer and Jerry.
One of the hardest times was about 6 years in, around 2010, 2011. It was kind of, we as a winery had to grow up a little bit. Legally, we started our first vintage in 2004. That's when we actually had a winery. We had a winery license. We actually had a vintage started in 2003 inside another winery. Under their bond, we legally moved it over to ours. We were tiny. It was nothing. It was a little bit of work on the weekend, but it wasn't a lot of responsibility yet. It was the two of us. We could do everything. We were start to finish it. Going in 2010, we're getting a little bigger. It's getting busier. It's getting just hard. Just the two of us. 11, 12, and then 13 is where it finally was kind of break time. We had our first child. I was in the hospital told I would never walk out of it. Had to hire an employee. It was first employee time. It was not just this little hobby thing that was our little thing to do. It was now becoming a business, and there was that fear of change, that fear of this isn't my hobby anymore. I'm not going to like it. It's a business now. That's not what I didn't want a business. I wanted a fun winery. And so it really, and that made it less enjoyable. It made it hard until I learned to navigate it. It takes some time, and we kept growing during that too. So it's that learning to mature with what you have. And everybody fears change. Yeah. We did it. And it went well, and it kept changing. And so that's what made it really difficult.
I mean, so many times I had these conversations with Jerry. I was like, let's just pushing him and gently encouraging us to grow and grow and grow and grow. And Jerry pushing back at me because he didn't want to. It was uncomfortable. And I am all about like, let's do this if we're going to do this. And let's make all the changes. I think the biggest change for me, I mean, as Jerry alluded to, it's kids. Kids was like the ultimate change for everything. We've all talked about this. Is like, what is the biggest change in your life? You never regret having kids. No, it's the greatest gift ever. But it has made things a lot more complicated. And it's just, we were able to do this. I would work at the times, Monday through Friday. There were nights where I would get off work and we would go out to the winery. We would both work at night. Saturday, Sunday, all day, we were the only ones to run that tasting room. We did this for years, the two of us. It was like our dating and our relationship grew and we got to know each other. Yes, we went to dinner, we went to movies, we did that when we had time. But on the weekends, when Jerry and I started dating, I lived in Seattle and he lived in Redmond, and I would spend the night at his house and we'd get up and go for a run, and then we'd go to the winery all day. And then we'd have dinner and then rinse and repeat. And in the morning, Monday morning, I would go back to work and he would go to work, and we would do this day in and day out for years. And it changed with kids.
I want to point out, so there's no confusion, when they talk about how Monday through Friday they would go to work and then come back, and then on the weekends they would go to the winery. Yes, they both kept their full-time jobs. So Monday through Friday, Jerry is a cop. Monday through Friday, Jennifer is a reporter. So they have full-time jobs and kids, and they're starting a new business. So it's not like they let something go to invest that time and energy into the winery. There are a lot of balls up in the air here.
Yeah. Especially when you talk about it being a passion that he had and kind of like this hobby. And then it grew so big that he realized, oh no, this is becoming so big. I need to make this a bigger job.
Yeah.
Like, I'm losing my hobby. It's becoming a job. It kind of reminds me of in reporting at KOMO, I met this woman who makes pies. She started selling them to a couple of friends. Friends wanted more and more. So she's like, okay, fine, I'll open a tiny little business out of my garage. And I asked her, because she's really in demand now. She sells out so quick. And I was like, do you have any aspirations to expand? And it was kind of the same dilemma that Jerry's talking about. She's like, if I expand and get bigger, then that defeats this purpose of this being my passion project and a way that I'm able to be at home and do this with my family. And it turns into that, quote, job. So, just another example of kind of how people are navigating this. How far does the hobby take you until it pushes you into a new territory that now you have to take it very seriously?
And it's also kind of turns the old formula of success on its head, I think, because a lot of people think, oh, you're growing. People want to buy your stuff. Your stuff is good. This is great. You're growing. That's what you want, right? And here they are saying, well, Jerry, at the time, saying, no, that's not what I wanted. It's great that I make good wine. It's great that people want to buy it. But the growth wasn't exactly what he had planned on. And the growth wasn't the dream, and it's so interesting to hear that. Sometimes success is your greatest stumbling block. But what an interesting problem to have. You're so good, it forces you to grow and you don't want to.
Right. He mentioned something in that soundbite, and I'm wondering if you know some of the background on it. He mentioned he was in the hospital and was told that he wouldn't walk out. What happened?
So a lot of the time he had stress-induced health issues. And so he didn't really go into specific details. He's fine now. But it was enough where we talk about, when you're so stressed out, it manifests in your body.
The body keeps the score.
Absolutely. And that totally happened with him. He needed to slow down. He needed to take care of himself. He got really sick. He's better now. But add that was one more thing into all the stuff that they were dealing with.
And then kind of forcing his hand to somewhat give in to the fact that it was getting so big, because then he mentions he had to hire some people.
Yes.
To step in and kind of fill some of that void. So
it's not a hobby now when you're hiring out.
It's not. And then you talk about kids coming into the mix. And for them to acknowledge that, their time was so tight already. That they're already working their full-time jobs. And then building a winery from the ground up. And then you add kids on top of that. And yeah, no wonder he had a lot of stress, and I'm sure that she carried a lot of that too.
She talks about how she pushed him, like, no, we can do this. This goes into the next conversation, which is, when two people meet a challenge head on, we're two individuals. Even if you're married, even if you truly love the other person, devoted to them, it doesn't mean you think the same way. It doesn't mean you have the same opinions.
Ain't that the truth?
So how do you... I don't want to call this, problem solving, but when you're both facing that same hill together, how do you navigate it? It's not easy. And Jennifer and Jerry, they have different personalities. And I love that about talking to the two of them together because it really shines through. You can see the differences. So here's how they met the challenge and their different takes on what they were looking at together.
Jerry talks about risk, and we always talk about risk. And, yes, it was risky to start a winery. Jerry sold his house to pay for the winery, so we didn't want loans. We didn't want business partners. We did this all on our own. And when I saw the level of success. I kept seeing the success. I'm the taster in person, so I'm the one who has more interaction with customers and critics and sommeliers, all of it. I'm the one who kind of sees the forward facing. And so I knew this was successful, and I knew this was going okay. And I felt like, let's do this. Let's try. Let's keep pushing it. And I think I pushed Jerry to take you definitely took more risks because I was pushing you harder.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, take one of the big background risks, money. Like, I knew what that would cost. I'm like, that's really risking a lot. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, man, I really lost everything. I prefer to do the slow incremental because then I kind of knew, but it would have taken much longer to get to where we are now. Had Jennifer not been pushing that idea, I would have been growing much slower. I was just risk adverse at that point just because it had been a lot of years of taking risk all the time has a stress with it. And I just wanted to point to okay, I don't want stress anymore. I don't want to, okay, can we pay for this yet? And again, it's partially, I know there's an adage that you need debt to make money. And I don't like debt. So I always kind of wanted to make this so that the winery pays for itself or I can assist paying for it. I didn't want loans, all that stuff. And I was just risk adverse to that side. That's my parents talking. I can't get rid of that part of it. Everything else I've kind of done what I wanted, but that's one financially. I've still subscribed much to my parents. And so she was the one that really kind of pushed you got to do it. It'll succeed. You got to do it.
Can you imagine how hard these conversations were? Because, they're talking about this in hindsight now. And I have to thank them for their honesty and authenticity about this because people, don't like to talk about money. They don't like to talk about the risk in terms of money, what it took to make their business grow. And I can't imagine those kitchen table conversations where, Jerry's like, I'm not well. This stress is awful. My hobby is now a nightmare. And Jennifer having that intuition, no, we got to do this because it's going to be great.
Yeah, to know that they were onto something. And for Jerry to have that cheerleader in a way, it's like cheerleader / coach. Sometimes you need some tough love from your coach of being like, get back in there, buddy, you got this. And that's kind of like what she was because she was seeing the results. She's the one in the tasting room. She's hearing that reaction from people and knows that there's something to it. But when you put everything on the line, until you're seeing those tangible results, I mean, she just mentioned that he sold his home because he didn't want to be in debt to create this business.
So if it didn't work, the stakes are extremely high.
Yeah, extremely high. But this is why oftentimes in a partnership, it can be helpful to have, two different people with different personalities, different motivations, different ways of going about things. And it sounds like she was what he needed in that moment to make it what it is now.
It's true. And I don't want to say that you always need someone. It's nice if you do. But I think back to your interview with Michelle Millman when she was leaving one career to do another thing, making that decision on her own, feeling like, I have this career opportunity to really pivot, do something I've never done before that I have no background in, but something tells me I should do it, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's really great. They were able to do that. And for him to acknowledge his personality, I don't know about you, but when I'm very critical of myself and I look at myself, I can be like, oh, that's David Koopman's part of me talking, or that's my mom, Lynn. You can just tell the different parts of personality for him being risk adverse. What did he say? He's like, that was my dad.
Yeah. Oh, he talks about that a couple of times in the interview where just what's ingrained in you as you grow up and what you pick up from your parents, So he talks about the bad wine that they drank. And he also talks about, the financial prudence, the stuff that they taught him that just kind of infiltrated into his brain and helped him make his decisions.
And especially when you're looking at core things that make up a person, how you feel about, what are some main building blocks? I don't know. You can think of where are you in religion or how you deal with money or how does work fit into your life? And so many of those things absorbed from our parents and we don't really know it until we're big kids, starting businesses and having careers and, putting our financial lives on the line to try and see if a dream will take off.
At Overlake Medical Center and Clinics, we offer the full spectrum of care for every stage of life. And with our skilled and compassionate physicians and care teams, it's so much more than a place to get better. It's where you can achieve a lifetime of good health. Welcome to Overlake, where your care is our passion. For more information, visit overlakehospital.org.
They're such strong personalities, the two of them, Jerry and Jennifer. And it's what makes it fun talking to them about their differences. So how do you untangle from the constant we-ness of it all? Because, you're a unit.
And they have mentioned just in some of these sound bites, the two of us, several times.
That's right. But they're not attached at the hip. They're very different. And I think some of that success, whether it's their approach to conquering, business challenges, parenting issues, their relationship, it's important that I make sure to describe them as individuals too, because that's how they see themselves.
We do best when we're busy, and we do best when there's a lot of chaos happening. And I think things get more stressful when we have downtime. I hope that doesn't sound bad, but we do great on vacation. But I think if Jerry were to take a close look at the things I do at the winery and have the time to overanalyze what I do and vice versa, I think that's where we would fight. But we've come to this realization where it's best, not just for our relationship, but for everyone, whether for the winery, for us, for our family, if we just give each other space to do what we do best. So I handle, obviously, the taste room stuff. I handle out-of-state sales and distributors, but also our amazing team. And if I have a question about our team members, usually I just work through it. And sometimes we'll talk about it. But usually we just sort of, I don't want to say we do our work in our silos, but we discuss it. But it's also the best thing for our relationship. We learned early on. I mean, imagine being in a relationship where you're dating and then you're, do your job 5 days a week, and then you do this other job the rest of the time, and we're up sun up to sundown, and we go to dinner, and all we do is talk about the winery. And we're still in that early relationship stage where we're not really talking about anything but work. So I think we've done a good job of realizing, let's step back and talk about ourselves. Let's talk about things that are interesting. Let's talk about books and movies and other stuff, right? And so it's sometimes like when you have kids, all you do is talk about your kids. And trust me, we do that all the time. But it's just like the winery, you have to compartmentalize it a little bit and give yourself space to respect your relationship too, and still date and still be interested in each other.
And we're also not people that have to be with each other all the time. Like she was down in Arizona last weekend with one of the kids, and then they stayed down there for some time. And it's a good thing. We don't have to be together all the time. We need our own. Each of us need our own time. And as she said, we respect those boundaries of sometimes you got things to do.
I know couples that love to be together all the time.
Are you one of those couples?
No.
Okay.
No, but
Jen and Jerry.
That was just half of what I was going to say, Kelly. The other half of my point was that the couples that do want to be together all the time love it. And I think the secret is if you can find that other person that shares what you care about, then good for you. I'm not so sure you can go out and seek that. Sometimes those discoveries aren't made until much later in a relationship. And, I don't want to always talk about the whole having kids and how that changes the dynamic. But you throw kids into the mix and it's that's a new persona that the two of you are now that you weren't before. Mm-hmm. And children bring out different aspects of your personality that you didn't even know existed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When you were saying those vows, I didn't know. I didn't know that that existed.
So how do you see this play out? How do you see this play out with you? You say that you're fine doing other things. You guys have different different likes and hobbies even.
Absolutely. I'll give you an example. We're both Wazoo Cougars, right? Cougs. Mm-hmm. Love.
I'm in that club.
Love, yes. We're all in that club. My husband, Eric, fanatic. Loves to go to the games, loves going to Pullman. I'm happy going to Pullman, the home games, once a season.
When it's nice weather.
Ideally, yes. Eric would go if he had free weekends, like all the time. He doesn't mind driving over there. I think he slept in my old minivan once or twice. He loves it, and I encourage it. Yeah, go with the buddies. Go. It's good for the soul.
Yeah,
Yeah. It would be hard if he was like, "Why don't you want to go with me, babe? We're married. Why don't you share my passion?" And I'm glad that has never been asked, because I think that would be hard.
I think the closest thing that I've gotten to asking Michael to do something and he actively told me no was when I was really in my Orange Theory phase.
Oh, you were?
This was several years ago, and I was doing Orange Theory all the time.
Oh, I'm totally on Team Michael there.
Obsessed.
You wanted to be the couple
And I
that
was
does that together?
Michael, will you please just come do it with me one time? I know you are much more of a I'm going to do some squats and, I'm going to go lift in the gym. But would you please just come and do it with me one time? And he drew a line in the sand, and it always kind of ticked me off. I was like, will you please just cave and come do this with me? But no. The man just wants to do what he wants to do. But then there are things that are shared, like softball. And
yes,
that is one thing that is shared. But I totally get, it sounds like in their case, having different personalities is really helpful for them. And Jen just sounds like the Energizer Bunny. She's just let's go.
And they have their strengths, and Jen talks about she's the calendar keeper. Jerry is a organic chemist / cop. Okay, he knows about organization, formulas, meticulous planning. But for some reason, one of his weaknesses, the family calendar. She'll talk about that. She talked about that with me, but it was kind of funny. It was just we all have our Achilles heel.
I'm all about the calendar. I've got that thing on lockdown.
I think I kind of enjoy it.
Oh, it feels so good to know where you're going to be at what time.
So much power.
I know exactly. I can pencil anyone in to do anything when I want. I'm in charge.
So their dream realized, yes, they went through the hump. They're growing exponentially. Do we want the success? Do we keep going? Do we pare down? They got over that. Guardian Cellars, well known. You can find their wine almost everywhere. People love it.
Tasting room still out in Woodinville?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So here's the question I posed to them, because I want to take it back to the very first thing that Jerry talked about, where he's, it's on a whim. I'm driving by. I see this truck. Oh my God, I volunteer. They can't get rid of me. I love the process. I'm all in. People can relate to that. Not necessarily with the winery, but the whole when the dream bug bites them, it's like, oh, is this my thing? I asked them about that and what they would say, what kind of advice they would give to someone who kind of has felt that itch before. What do they do with it? Here's what they said.
If you have just a crazy idea that's not well thought out and you're just I just got to do this, probably not the way to do it. The first part is, if you can answer to yourself that I have truly thought this through, these are the risks, these are the rewards. If I have a certain level of risk and I only get a certain level of reward, say you risk everything and get almost nothing out of it, will you still be happy? And if the answer is yes, why not do it? If you're saying the risk is high and if the reward is this low, it will destroy me, you have to be willing to accept the bottom level of fulfillment out of that. And if that's enough for you, why wouldn't you do it? If your expectation is, if this 100% succeeds and that's the only way I'm going to be happy, don't do it.
People come to us pretty regularly saying they want to start a winery and they ask for advice. You have to think out whatever you're doing next. And you have to think, is this a logical plan? And if you could dabble in it first, we were lucky to have other jobs. That's the thing is it was before kids. It was before a mortgage. And, I had an apartment then. He obviously was living with his cat and his bathrobe inside a winery. But, for us, we were able to kind of jump in head first without losing everything. And I think you just have to be aware of where things are going. But in saying that, we've just lived through 2020 and 2021. We've been through the last couple of years. So if you have a good plan and you feel ready to make a jump and you feel ready to do something, it's just like I tell people now, drink the wine, eat the carbs, live the life. You just don't know what's going to happen.
Calculated risk. Mm-hmm. I mean, they put a lot on the line to get Guardian Cellars going. But, they talk about how people constantly come in. It's like, oh, we know your story. There's stories on the website, right? Cop meets journalist. By the way, Guardian Cellars, they have 2 labels. One is called newsprint, and the other is called Guardian.
Yes.
So that stems from their origin, the origin story. So they answer that question a lot, and I like their advice. I like how balanced it was, and I like how they constantly remind people, listen, when we went all in, we still had jobs. It wasn't like, here's my 2-week notice. I'm going to go do X, Y, and Z.
I've got 2 takeaways from the soundbite. A, Jerry hangs out in his bathrobe with his cat in the winery. I have a visual that I cannot shake.
Those were the early years, okay?
Okay,
Those were the
early years.
Yes.
You're right.
When he sold his house to buy the winery, because the winery was his house now.
Sure. He's added slippers now to the wardrobe now that he's fancy and so successful.
That's right.
The other one is, on this podcast, we have a tendency to talk to people who threw caution to the wind and leapt in and made a big change, not knowing what would happen. And I like this because it feels like a little bit of a different take. Mm-hmm. It is saying, look at it and think critically. Are you willing to accept the lowest reward for this risk? Rather than sometimes just saying, well, you don't know till you try and just jump in and see what happens. This is like, well, yes, and let's think about this critically. And I love thinking about that. I think there's always some element in that equation of, will you regret it if you don't try?
Yeah.
And it's a multi-factor equation. Maybe mix a little bit of that with also the reality, if it does not work, are you willing to accept those results as well? And see what that equation comes out to.
And would we be talking to them? Would I have interviewed them if Guardian fell on its head?
Probably not, is my guess.
Right.
And that's probably a similar case with a lot of people we talk to. I mean, look at Soberish Mom. Would we have been talking to her if she decided to do this influencer thing and it never took off? Probably not.
Right.
So we're able to learn from a lot of these success stories, but it's really great to hear them also planning for if it weren't to work out. And I think there are some good lessons to be learned in there too.
And hearing just how stressful it was, like those behind the scenes, late in the night conversations. And don't think for a moment that there wasn't passion in the sense that, sometimes they argue. Sometimes it's not a funny, fun, light conversation. It's
having your spouse be your coworker?
Right? But to bring it back to the success, when you talked about Soberish Mom, we talked about Guardian Cellars, because they were quote unquote successful. I can't let go of what Jerry was talking about, that success wasn't even what they wanted. It was too much for him. Success did not equal internal happiness and satisfaction. And I think that's another important conversation to have, because just because you are successful doesn't mean that you are happy. And he talked about that, where people need to understand the difference between the two things. And so when you are about to stick your neck out and you get bitten by the bug, I want to do this. Yes, there is that, worksheet you have to fill out, the calculated risk, right? Like, what am I putting on the line? What could happen if this doesn't work out? Blah, 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 blah. But there's that other internal soul searching you have to do of, is this truly what is going to bring me happiness? And maybe we don't consider that part all that much because we're too busy calculating the risk and reward.
If this is what you need to do, if I don't do this, it's now or never because you're already unhappy and this is the thing to make you happy, I think there's a greater thing we need to be looking at. It's not that this shiny object over here is what makes you happy. You're not finding happiness here. You got to be able to find happiness where you're at and then try to develop that more. And that's kind of what that step is into that new, whatever the project happens to be, is coming in there with some happiness already. The happiness should not be found based on this thing happening. That's, I think, the biggest pitfall. Because a lot of people come to us, I hate my job. I want to start a winery. I'm like, just because you like drinking wine and you think your idea of what it is and that will make me happy, that's not going to be what makes it succeed or makes you happy. You got to find happiness.
It brings me back to the very first thing he said. He loved being a chemist, so he majored in that. He loved being a cop, so he became a cop. He was not running from anything when the winery bug hit him. It's so profound because normally we're always trying to leave something, right? Like, this doesn't make me happy, so I need to find something that does. I'm searching for happiness. And here he is saying, you really need to start out happy or somewhat happy, because that's the only way you get to hang on to your happiness. There's no promise that this new thing, right, that you become obsessed with is going to fill whatever thing you want it to fill. And people don't talk about that, at least not the way that Jerry described. And it really kind of blew my mind.
I think as humans, it's very easy to think and to fall into the pattern of, if I just had this position at work and made X amount, then I would be happy, okay? Then I will have be successful, and then I'll be happy. And it's just so funny because, and I think that people can look at their own lives and find different spots where they have achieved a goal, but then did that make you happy? Was that the thing that made you happy?
Right.
And I think oftentimes we can find ourselves sitting in that position and saying, oh, I thought that this was the key. I did the work. I got here. I got that paycheck. I got the position, but I'm still not happy. And so I think that's what he's cautioning against. He's cautioning against trying to jump to the big money or the big success, because that's not where the happiness is going to lie. You might be standing at the end point looking back and say, this is it? This is what I fought so hard for?
It's such a mind trip, isn't it? Because it kind of goes against everything that what society shows us and teaches us, and you really have to really think about it from the way that Jerry talked about it. There's that, I'm going to butcher the saying, Kelly, but there's that philosopher, Alan Watts, and he said something like, the only Zen you're going to find at the mountaintop is the Zen you bring with you.
Oh, gosh.
And it kind of reminds me of that. You better be happy where you are before you make that leap, because that's the only happiness you bring to the table is it's already what's inside. Deep stuff. Deep stuff.
And what if you get to the top and it's really cloudy and you can't see anything?
Oh, gosh.
And that was the whole point? That's when you're sure glad you got that joy in your back pocket.
That reminds me of a horrible family trip we took, the Nom family took. I think we were in high school or something, and it was my dad's great idea to go to the Grand Canyon. We were living in Southern California at the time. We drove all the way over there. We got there, and it was foggy.
Oh, gosh.
I still remember that. I'm sure someone out there can relate. Because you don't know,
sure.
You go to the Grand Canyon, it was a terrible car trip. Get there, and what Grand Canyon?
And no payoff.
No payoff.
You know, when I was a kid, you know what my parents had us do for a spring break?
What?
Follow Lewis and Clark's trail. Follow Lewis and Clark's trail when you're in middle school.
I'm so sorry.
And we drove all the way out to this spot. My dad was really, really fixated on finding this
totally
one,
picture your dad.
This one spot where a battle happened of some kind, and it was like the only violent encounter they had. And we drove in the middle of nowhere to look at a tree with a fence around it.
That was the spot?
Meanwhile, I'm like 12, and I just want to be like with my friends and listening to NSYNC.
Yes, I know.
And here I am following Lewis and Clark's trail. Spring break.
You're totally going to do that.
1998.
You're going to do that to your kids, mark my word. It won't be that. It'll be some version of that to them, though.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know what it is.
Well, I'd like to thank Jerry and Jennifer for sharing their story and being so honest about what it took to get Guardian Cellars off the ground. And in case anyone is curious, everyone has kept their other jobs too. So they still have all of these things on their plate, and they have been able to somehow juggle it beautifully. It's a special skill set that they have, isn't it?
It sounds like they're a great team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for you guys.
Congratulations, guys. We will cheers to you with our tea.
And coffee. Cheers.
Cheers. Hard Turn is a Sinclair podcast produced out of KOMO TV in Seattle, Washington. We're your hosts, Kelly Koopmans
and Mary Nom. Our show is produced and edited by Jordan Rizzieri and Brian Petrus, with engineering support from Adam Bronstein, Bill Thesh, and John Reynolds. Production support from Eric Newell.
For more information on the topics discussed in this episode and to stay up to date on future episodes, follow us on Instagram at Hard Turn Podcast and on X at Hard Turn Pod.
You can follow Hard Turn on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Do you know someone making a big change in their life? Share this week's episode. Your recommendation helps our show grow. So spread the word.
There's a 2% chance this is not recording.
Hard Turn was presented by Overlake Medical Center and Clinics.